wrote the bill. Come on.
Okay,
Anyway.
Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota joins us now from Charleston, South Carolina. I like to consider you the voice of reason in the debate last night. But what the heck happened?
Yes.
Just overall, what did that feel like up there? That seemed a little crazy.
Well, I keep thinking about all these people watching the debate who have no idea who the candidates are practically. They tune in and then they see this slugfest. So I try to see it through their eyes, and my goal was to make a very clear differentiation with Bernie Sanders, because I don't think he should be leading our ticket. As you all know, in New Hampshire, I was the only one that raised my hand and said I had trouble with a socialist leading the ticket, and so I made my case. I also made a case against Donald Trump, but I did not get as much involved in all the infighting between everyone else. Sure, there's valid arguments you can make, but what kind of mess is that? I thought I really put a point on it when I said we can spend the next 4 months tearing each other apart, and if we do that, we're going to be able to see Donald Trump spend the next 4 years tearing our country apart.
So, Amy, I thought it was interesting at times. There would be like 5, 6, 7 seconds straight of about 5 people shouting at each other. Were you concerned up there? Or are you concerned this morning about how that makes the Democratic Party look? Because people are just now, I mean, Robert knows this better than any of us, are probably now really just starting to tune in, sit down and say,
South
okay,
Carolina was
who do we have? Who do we have? And they see people screaming and yelling and a free-for-all.
Right, and the only one that wins when that happens is Donald Trump.
Right.
So part of it is trying to keep the questions focused on substantive issues, and then part of it is how people ask for each other. And I think you got a really good point early on. I was listening. Some people do stuff to raise money, right? They want you guys to play the sound bites the next day. You're probably not going to play my answer on rural health care, which is more important to the people of South Carolina than a fight about who said what when. But that's what happens. So the fights get played, then people raise money online because of it.
So, Senator, can we talk
I've had
about
a few of those moments myself.
Can we talk about rural health care for a second? Because people don't understand. Sure. This is one of the, I think, one of the great ironies that Donald Trump does well in rural communities. But he has worked since he's gotten into office to gut funding for rural health care. And by the way, when you gut funding for Medicaid, you gut funding for rural health care.
That's exactly, and they are struggling right now. We've had record numbers of these hospitals closed down, kind of going in concert with farm bankruptcy rates, 25% increase because of the trade war and the like, and it's very devastating. And people don't see that in a lot of these towns, the child poverty rate is higher in rural than it is in urban because they simply don't have the services. So I was able to straightforward answer that question about keeping the hospitals open, about getting personnel to the hospitals through how we put incentives in our education policy, as well as immigration reform. But again, that's not the soundbite that you're going to be playing the next day. So I think, to me, I'm just going to keep on this. With coronavirus, I decided to give the CDC.gov website instead of my own website, in part to make the point this is a very serious matter. People need to start listening to what the experts and science tell them to prepare, because our president has not addressed the nation. He was pointed out earlier, cut back a bunch of the funding for planning with the CDC and coordination, and that's just wrong.
We're moving into crisis mode. Certainly, the markets are collapsing. We've lost almost 2,000 points in 2 days. Business leaders I'm talking to say the supply chain coming out of China could be disrupted for months, and it'll have a devastating impact on not only China's economy, but economies across the globe. We have a president who is angry at his own administration officials for telling the truth, that Americans have to get prepared for a possible pandemic. Well, you can tell us what you do as president. I think we know what you do as president. You'd be very responsible, and you'd put together a task force. You'd have a czar. You'd do what Barack Obama did and what responsible leaders do. But what can you do right now as a United States Senator? What can the United States Senate do to push for answers from and require that this administration actually protect the American people from this coming possible pandemic?
Well, our job is oversight and to push them, and I think you see that starting when they just asked for $1 billion, which is not going to be enough. Using, as you noted, the model from Ebola and what then Secretary Burwell did in terms of coordinating. I remember her constantly calling myself and members, informing us about what was happening, answering our questions. All of that is going to have to happen. At the same time, you have this coordination with all local hospitals, local health commissioners, and then the rest of the world. It is a massive, massive effort, and we do have the benefit of having learned from Ebola. But the way he treats allies, the dissing that goes on all the time, the bad feelings that are there because of what he's done in the past, makes it much harder to make these tough decisions. And I think one minor illustration of the chaos in his administration was when those 14 people who had been infected were put on the plane with the people that weren't, despite the recommendation of the CDC not to do that. And that happened under the mess of their administration. That all being said, my point last night was, I think we should start acting like a president if you want to be one. So I mentioned a few things he'd done wrong, but my main point was to the American people about what we're going to have to do going forward. And I think we need to see more of that on that stage, and that's what I'll continue to do.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.